Hey everyone, it's Anya. I'm sitting here today, in my own space, a place that finally feels like mine, and I wanted to share something deeply personal with you. Something that took me years, decades even, to fully understand, and then even longer to heal from. It's a story about family, about the people who are supposed to be your safe harbor, and what happens when they turn out to be the storm instead. For most of my life, I was the quiet one, the responsible one. The one who always did the right thing, who tried to keep the peace, who made herself small so others could shine, or frankly, just so others could function. I thought that was love. I thought that was being a good daughter, a good sister. I saw the cracks in the foundation, the uneven ground under our feet, but I told myself it was normal, that all families had their issues, that mine wasn't really that bad. The truth is, some ground isn't just uneven, it's actively collapsing. And when you're the one constantly trying to hold it up, stone by heavy stone, while everyone else walks across your back, eventually, you break. My story is about that breaking point, the seismic shift that happened when I realized the people I loved most were the ones causing the most damage. It's about the slow, painful process of detaching, of building my own ground, and finding my own strength when I felt like I had none left. Maybe some of you watching this today can relate. Maybe you've been the peacemaker, the fixer, the one always expected to understand, to give just a little more, even when you had nothing left. Maybe you've felt invisible in your own home, your needs and feelings consistently overlooked in favor of someone else's, usually louder, demands. If any of that resonates, even a little, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It helps to know we're not alone in these experiences. It started subtly, as these things often do. A childhood where my sister, Lena, 2 years younger, was always the focus. She was the sensitive one, the difficult one, which in our family translated to the one who needs all the attention. My mother revolved around Lena. Lena's moods dictated the atmosphere in the house. Lena's fleeting interests became family projects. My accomplishments, quieter and more academic, were met with a brief nod before the conversation swung back to whatever Lena was doing or needing or feeling that day. I learned early to be self-sufficient, to entertain myself, to manage my own problems, to not add to the burden. The subtext was clear. I was easy. I wasn't a problem. And because I wasn't a problem, I wasn't a priority. My mother's love felt conditional, earned by being unobtrusive and helpful, while Lena's seemed inherent, given simply for existing, for being Lena, the complicated, demanding one. I internalized this. I saw it as my role, to be the steady one, the one they didn't have to worry about, the one who worried about them instead. As we grew up, the pattern solidified. Lena drifted through life, from one half-hearted pursuit to another, always needing a safety net. My mother, instead of encouraging Lena's independence, facilitated her dependence. She'd bail her out, make excuses for her, smooth over her failures. And who was often called upon to help? Me. Lena needed help moving. Again. Lena needed money for rent. Again. Lena had a relationship crisis and needed to stay with me for weeks. My quiet apartment, my carefully built routine, my personal space, all were secondary to Lena's needs, as defined and amplified by my mother. And if I ever hesitated, the guilt trip was immediate and heavy. But she's your sister, Anya. She needs you. Or, your mother is so worried about Lena, you don't want to upset her, do you? It was emotional blackmail, pure and simple. My natural empathy, my desire to be a good person, was weaponized against me. I was constantly performing unseen labor. Not just helping Lena, but managing my mother's anxiety about Lena, listening to her endless complaints, trying to offer solutions that were never taken, and generally being the emotional shock absorber for both of them. It was exhausting. It was like carrying two extra adults on my back through life, while they complained about the view. My own life felt like it was happening in the margins. My job was demanding, but I enjoyed it. I had friends, though finding time for them around the constant family demands was a struggle. Relationships were difficult. How could anyone fit into a life that was already so overcrowded with other people's emergencies? I dated, but the relationships often fizzled out, partly because I was emotionally drained, and partly because my family cast a long, inconvenient shadow. The financial aspect grew over time, too. It wasn't just small loans to Lena that were never repaid, it was the expectation that I would contribute more than my share when our mother needed something. A new roof for the house she owned, where Lena often stayed rent-free. Help with medical bills when she was sick. I earned a good salary, I was responsible with my money, saving carefully. Lena lived paycheck to paycheck, often in debt, and my mother seemed to view my savings as a joint family pool, primarily for Lena's benefit or her own. Lena, of course, never contributed to any of these shared family expenses. Her excuse was always that she didn't have the money. My mother's explanation was always that Lena couldn't handle financial stress. I, apparently, could handle everyone's financial stress. There was one specific incident that began to chip away at my carefully constructed facade of acceptance. Our grandmother passed away. She had a small apartment she owned, intended to be split between my mother and her brother. My mother's brother suggested selling it and splitting the proceeds. My mother, however, had another idea. It would be perfect for Lena, she announced one evening over a strained video call. Me on one screen, her and Lena on another. Lena sat beside her, looking vaguely interested, scrolling on her phone. My stomach clenched. Lena needs her own place, yes, I said carefully. But surely selling it is the most straightforward way to handle Grandma's wishes. Oh, Anya, always so practical, my mother sighed, a familiar, deflating sound. This isn't about money, it's about Lena having stability. She could live there. It's small, but it's rent-free. Rent-free? I echoed, bewildered. But it's an asset, an inheritance. It's family supporting family, Lena chimed in, finally looking up from her phone. It makes sense. I need a place to live. But what about the value? I pressed. That apartment is worth a significant amount. If Lena lives there, Mother gets half the value locked up, and Uncle gets nothing from that half. And I get nothing at all from it. Grandma intended for her assets to be split. My mother's face hardened. Anya, don't be difficult. Uncle is fine, he has his own house. This is important for Lena. She needs a leg up, we discussed it. She'll live there, and it will stay in the family. When I'm gone, it will pass to Lena. The air left my lungs. When she was gone? So not only was my potential inheritance from my grandmother being redirected entirely to Lena, but now my potential inheritance from my mother, specifically this asset, was also being designated solely for Lena. It wasn't just about an apartment, it was about a lifetime of being overlooked crystallizing into a concrete financial statement of where I stood. Nowhere compared to Lena. So, I said slowly, my voice trembling slightly despite my effort to control it. Lena gets Grandma's apartment, worth X amount, rent-free, and eventually owns it. And I get nothing from that asset? Don't be so greedy, Anya, my mother snapped. You have a good job, you manage perfectly well, Lena struggles. That's not the point. I finally raised my voice, the years of quiet, simmering boiling over. It's about fairness. It's about Grandma's wishes. It's about the principle. You and Uncle were meant to split it. Not Lena gets Uncle's share, and then Lena also gets your share eventually, cutting me out completely. We are doing what is best for the family, my mother said, her tone final, dismissive. Lena had gone back to her phone, clearly bored by the conversation. Her future had been secured at my expense, and she didn't even have to listen to the awkward fallout. Best for Lena, you mean, I said, my voice flat. The revelation hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just passive favoritism anymore. It was active, calculated redirection of assets, justified by the same old narrative of Lena's neediness and my supposed strength. My strength wasn't a quality to be admired, it was a reason to exploit me further. The call ended shortly after, a wall of cold silence from my mother, meeting my raw hurt. I sat there, staring at the darkened screen, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't just about the money, though the financial betrayal was significant. It was about the message, the clear, unambiguous message that I was worth less. My years of support, my stability, my emotional labor, my financial contributions, none of it mattered. Lena's struggle, real or perceived, trumped everything. My entire life, I had been building bridges, and in this moment, they had burned the ground right out from under me. The next few weeks were a blur of pain and confusion. I spoke to my uncle, who was also blindsided by my mother's decision regarding the apartment. He was hurt, but resigned. "That's just how she is," he said, a weary echo of the sentiment I'd heard my whole life. "That's just how she is." A simple phrase used to excuse a lifetime of harmful behavior. I tried talking to my mother again. I wrote her emails, pouring out my hurt, explaining how this felt like a final confirmation that I didn't matter. Her responses were brief, defensive, turning it back on me. I was ungrateful, selfish, obsessed with money. She accused me of trying to take something away from Lena, twisting my pain into an attack on my sister. I tried talking to Lena. She was indifferent. "It's mother's decision," she shrugged. "I need a place to live. You don't need the money anyway." The casual cruelty of it was stunning. She genuinely saw nothing wrong with receiving a substantial asset purely due to favoritism, while I was dismissed for questioning it. It wasn't even malicious, it was just utter self-absorption, enabled by years of being told her needs were paramount. The emotional spiral was intense. I felt like I was drowning. The foundation of my understanding of my family, fragile as it was, had completely crumbled. I questioned everything. Had they ever truly loved me, or was I just a useful resource? Was my entire identity built on being the good one, the one who didn't rock the boat, because that was the only way I received any crumbs of approval? I pulled away. Calls became less frequent. My voice messages went unanswered for days. The expectation of my usual helpfulness hung in the air, but I couldn't bring myself to fulfill it. I was raw, wounded, and every interaction felt like rubbing salt in the wound. My mother complained about my distance, my lack of contact. She didn't ask about my feelings, she just demanded I return to my role. This period was dark. I felt isolated, grieving not just the betrayal, but the loss of the family I wished I had. The family unit, however dysfunctional, had been my anchor, my identity. Cutting that tie, or having it so brutally severed, left me adrift. I questioned my own worth. If my own mother and sister could discard my feelings and needs so easily, was I inherently unlovable? A friend noticed my distress. Sarah. She didn't pry initially, just offered quiet support. When I finally broke down and told her everything, the history, the favoritism, the apartment, the dismissal of my pain, she listened without judgment. She didn't try to fix it or tell me what to do. She just validated my feelings. "Anya," she said softly, "that's not okay. None of that is okay. You have every right to be hurt. You have every right to be angry. And you have every right to decide how you want to be treated." That simple validation was a lifeline. Hearing someone else acknowledge the injustice, seeing the situation reflected in her eyes as clearly abusive, was a revelation. It wasn't just me being too sensitive or greedy, as my mother had claimed. It was a real, objective pattern of exploitation and emotional neglect. Sarah gently suggested therapy. I was resistant at first. Therapy felt like admitting I was broken. But the pain was too great to bear alone. I found a therapist, a kind, insightful woman, named Dr. Plosist Ramirez. Dr. Ramirez helped me untangle the knot of emotions. She helped me see the family dynamic for what it was, a toxic system built on enmeshment, manipulation, and extreme favoritism. She introduced me to concepts like emotional labor, parentification, where a child is forced into a caregiver role for parents or siblings, and codependency. It was like she was giving names to things I had felt my whole life but never understood. I learned that my people-pleasing wasn't a virtue, it was a trauma response, a coping mechanism developed in childhood to try and earn love and avoid conflict in an unpredictable environment. I learned that I wasn't responsible for my mother's or sister's happiness or stability, that their choices were their own, and enabling their dysfunction wasn't helping them, it was just hurting me. Setting boundaries felt terrifying. It went against every instinct I had developed over 30 years. My family saw boundaries not as healthy limits, but as personal attacks. Dr. Ramirez prepared me for the backlash. They will resist, she warned. They liked things the way they were. You changing the dynamic threatens their comfort. They might escalate. They might try to guilt you, blame you, or even punish you by withdrawing affection or trying to turn other family members against you. She was right. When I tried to establish small boundaries, saying I couldn't talk on the phone every single night, or that I wasn't available to drop everything and drive across town on short notice, the pushback was immediate. My mother became colder, more critical. Lena complained about my new attitude. The silent treatment was a frequent weapon. It was incredibly painful. Part of me wanted to cave, just to make the hurt stop, to return to the familiar, albeit painful, status quo. But Dr. Ramirez had given me tools. She helped me understand that their reaction wasn't about me being wrong, it was about them being unwilling to adapt. She helped me practice assertive communication, stating my needs calmly, without apology, and disengaging if the conversation became circular or abusive. I understand you're upset that I can't talk tonight, I practiced saying, my voice shaking the first few times. I have plans. I can talk tomorrow. The first time I said it to my mother, she was furious. Plans? What could be more important than your mother? My old self would have crumbled, apologized profusely, and canceled my plans. But I took a deep breath, remembering Dr. Ramirez's words. Don't justify, don't argue, don't defend. I have plans, Mother, I repeated, my voice steadier this time. I'll call you tomorrow. Fine, she snapped and hung up. My heart pounded. I felt sick. But underneath the fear, a tiny spark of something else flickered. Pride. I hadn't caved. I had held my boundary. It was a small victory, but in a lifetime of defeats, it felt monumental. The boundaries escalated. I stopped loaning money, gently but firmly stating that I wasn't in a position to help financially anymore. This led to a major conflict with both Lena and my mother, who accused me of abandoning Lena when she needed me most. Blood is thicker than water, Anya, my mother cried, twisting the proverb into a tool for manipulation. And clean water is better than toxic sludge, I thought, though I didn't say it out loud. Instead, I stuck to the script. I understand you're worried about Lena, but I cannot provide financial support. There are resources she can explore. Resources? She needs family. And I need to be responsible with my own finances, I stated, ending the conversation quickly after that. The silence that followed felt vast, terrifying, and liberating all at once. The most difficult boundary was limiting contact. The calls were still steeped in their narrative, my mother's complaints, Lena's dramas, thinly veiled criticisms of me. I decided I couldn't be their primary emotional support system anymore. It was damaging my own mental health. I told them I would be reducing calls and visits, explaining that I needed more space for myself. This was met with the most intense backlash yet. Tears, accusations, emotional outbursts. My mother became ill whenever I set a boundary, requiring more of my help. Lena suddenly faced a series of crises that only I could supposedly fix. It was a full court press, a desperate attempt to pull me back into the old dynamic. It was agonizing. There were days I felt like giving up, like the pain of the conflict was worse than the pain of the quiet suffering. But I kept coming back to what Dr. Ramirez had told me, the discomfort of growth is temporary, the discomfort of staying small and exploited is permanent. I visualized the apartment, the symbol of my value being deemed less than Lena's. It fueled my resolve. I deserved more. I deserved to be treated with respect. I deserved to have my own life. I leaned heavily on Sarah and Dr. Ramirez. They were my anchors in the storm. Sarah reminded me of my strengths, the person I was outside of my family's narrative. Dr. Ramirez helped me process the guilt and fear, reinforcing that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's self-preservation, it's honoring your own well-being. Slowly, painfully, the dynamic began to shift, not because they accepted my boundaries, but because I enforced them consistently. If a call became critical or demanding, I would say, "I'm going to end the call now," and hang up, despite my trembling hands. If an email was accusatory, I wouldn't respond, or would send a brief reply redirecting back to my needs. I stopped attending family gatherings where I knew I would be subjected to their triangulation or passive aggression. There were times they would act hurt and confused, claiming they didn't understand why I was pushing them away. It was gaslighting, pure and simple. They understood perfectly. They just didn't like the consequences. They wanted the benefits of my support without respecting me as an autonomous person with my own needs. The distance grew. It was a quiet grief, a constant ache in the background. I missed the idea of a close family, the one I saw in movies or heard about from friends. But the reality was that the closeness I had was built on my own self-denial, and that wasn't sustainable, or even real intimacy. It was a performance. As I created space from the toxic dynamic, something amazing started to happen. I began to hear my own voice. The constant hum of their needs, their dramas, their expectations began to fade, and in the quiet, I could hear myself think. I started identifying my own needs, my own desires, things I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge for years. My relationships with friends deepened because I had more energy and emotional availability for them. I pursued hobbies I had always put off. I invested more in my career, not as a distraction, but because I had the mental space to focus and excel. I started dating someone new, someone who saw me, truly saw me, and valued my independence and strength, qualities I had been taught to hide. The process wasn't linear. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, triggered by a guilt-tripping message or a particularly lonely holiday, but I learned to manage them, using the tools Dr. Ramirez had given me. I journaled, I talked to Sarah, I reminded myself of how far I had come, of the heavy weight I had lifted off my shoulders. I had to mourn the loss of the family I thought I had, and accept the family I actually had. It was a painful grieving process, acknowledging that the unconditional love I craved wasn't coming from them. And that was okay. I could build my own family, a family of choice, comprised of supportive friends, a loving partner, and eventually, perhaps, a family of my own making. I learned that setting boundaries wasn't about punishing my family, it was about protecting myself. It was about honoring my own worth, which was inherent, not dependent on how useful I was to others. It was about reclaiming my time, my energy, my finances, and my emotional well-being. The apartment situation never resolved in my favor. Lena lives there now. My mother still sees nothing wrong with her decision. It remains a painful symbol, but its power over me has diminished. It's a reminder of the past, of the cost of silence and people-pleasing, but it no longer dictates my future. Today, my relationship with my mother and sister is minimal. We exchange brief, polite messages on holidays. We don't discuss anything of substance. There are no more late-night emergency calls, no more financial demands, no more expectation that I will put their needs above my own. It's a quiet relationship, devoid of the manufactured drama that used to consume me, but also devoid of true intimacy. It's not the ending I would have written for my family story, not the one where they suddenly see the light and we all have a perfect, loving relationship. That kind of reconciliation isn't always possible, or even healthy, when the other people aren't willing to acknowledge their behavior or change. But it's an ending where I am safe, where I am seen, where I am finally the priority in my own life. I stand on my own ground now, ground that I built, piece by painstaking piece. It's solid, and it's mine. So, that's my story. It's messy, it's painful, and it's still a work in progress. Healing isn't a destination, it's a journey, with ups and downs. But I'm on a path now that feels authentic, a path where I'm not shrinking myself to fit into someone else's narrow view of who I should be. If you're in a similar situation, feeling unseen, unheard, or exploited in your own family, please know you are not alone. Your feelings are valid. Your needs matter. You have the right to set boundaries, even if it's hard, even if it causes conflict. It might feel like you're losing your family, but you're really finding yourself. And that's the most important discovery you can ever make. Building a life where you are respected and valued is possible. It starts with small steps, with finding your voice, with reclaiming your power, one boundary at a time. It took me years, but the peace, the freedom, the sense of finally being true to myself is worth everything. Absolutely everything. Thank you for listening. If this resonated with you, please consider giving this video a like. It helps more people find these stories and know they aren't alone. Subscribe if you want to follow my journey and hear more of my reflections. And please, feel free to share your own experiences or reflections in the comments below. Let's support each other. Remember, you are worthy of love, respect, and a life that is truly yours. You are not responsible for anyone else's happiness or choices. Your only responsibility is to yourself, and that's more than enough.